everyone, and welcome to this special episode of the Knitted by Whitney podcast. This is not a podcast episode. This is my special 1-year anniversary video. Yes, I have been on YouTube for over a year now. It's been a little while since my anniversary date, but it took me a while to get everything together for this video, so I'm releasing it a little later than my 1-year anniversary. But I am excited to share with you this video. Probably a few months ago, I polled my followers on Instagram about what they would like to see for my 1-year anniversary special, and the winning video idea was my top favorite makes. So I'm here to share with you my top 15 favorite things that I have knitted since I started knitting. And I've been knitting since January of 2015, so I'm coming up on about 7.5 years of being a knitter. So I have a lot to choose from, but I am very excited to share with you these items today. What I'm going to do is I am going to be modeling every one of the items that I do have. Any of the ones that I don't, I'll share pictures next to me. I will also share any pattern names, all of that information right here on the screen next to me, so that if you are interested in making any of these items yourself, I can send you to where you need to go to find out how to make them. As I was going through my list of some of my top favorite makes, it struck me as kind of funny that I am known on my YouTube channel for mainly talking about garment projects, and I would say at least half of the projects that I have to share with you today are accessories, which, it kind of makes sense because especially when I started out knitting, I focused more on accessories because they were smaller projects, they were more like quick gratification. I didn't have to work on them for as long as a garment, especially because I taught myself a lot of new techniques when I first started knitting. I was like a sponge. I just wanted to absorb all kinds of different styles of knitting, like cables, lace, colors, everything like that. So I didn't really stick to one thing and really master that thing by doing a lot of large projects like garments. I just did a little taste of each with like a hat or a scarf, or in some cases, yes, garments. But for the most part, I was all over the place, and I have a lot of really interesting things to share with you today. So I'm going to be doing my list from 15 down to 1, because I think it would be more exciting to share with you my absolute favorites at the very end. Some of you might know some of these projects because I talked about them a little bit in my 1K Ask Me Anything video special, because I was asked what my favorite things are that I've made. So if you've watched that video, the final top favorite items might not be much of a surprise, but for those of you who haven't watched it, this will all be brand new to you. And for the most part, I think I only have maybe 1 or 2 things that have actually featured on my podcast. The rest of them are all things that I made before I started the podcast, so they are going to be new to you. So I hope you are all going to enjoy this lovely romp through my favorite projects. Number 15 on my list is this adorable little colorwork headband, which it might surprise some of you to know is actually my own design. Yes, I've actually made a design. I've made 3 technically, and they're all free on Ravelry, but 2 of them I have since, you can't remove them from Ravelry, but I have said that they are no longer available on Ravelry because they were inspired by Harry Potter, and I support trans rights, and I vehemently oppose J.K. Rowling's opinions and views on the trans community, so I wanted to not provide those anymore in solidarity with the trans community. However, this headband is not inspired by Harry Potter, so it is still available on Ravelry as a free pattern. I have called this my Ice Diamond headband, which is a little self-explanatory. I have done diamonds and the colors are kind of like ice-related blues. Funny story behind this headband, I wanted to try colorwork a few years ago, and I kept looking for an easy colorwork pattern, and those are not easy to come by. So I saw an idea of a headband on Pinterest, and I think it was just like a commercially made one because I searched everywhere for this headband, and it was sort of like a Norwegian style of very even color work in the sense of like there's very short floats. And I figured that that would be the easiest way for me because the floats were what I was most worried about getting wrong. And I couldn't find a pattern that I felt was easy enough for me, so I created this one. I actually made it pretty easily. I just created my colorwork pattern, my repeatable pattern that went across the headband in an Excel spreadsheet. And then I wrote out the rest of the pattern. I have this really cute, it almost looks like it's an I-cord edging on the top and the bottom. I'll take it off so you can see it a little better. Don't mind the headband hair. So I'll show you this design a little closer. It kind of looks like there is this cute little I-cord edging on the top and the bottom, but it's really just some purl stitches because the inside is all stockinette. And that is because I wanted to hide all of my floats. I didn't want you to be able to see the wrong side of the color work. I wanted to keep it looking pretty nice and clean. And I also wanted to make sure that it was double layered for warmth because I live in Canada, we have cold winters. You kind of like to have something really thick and woolly on your ears. And at the time I also had different labels than I do now. And even if I bring this up close, you're not going to be able to read what this label says. I can barely read it now, but if I remember correctly from when I ordered these labels, it says, hand knitted by Whitney, this took forever. But funny enough, this didn't take forever. It actually was a pretty quick knit, and I was really happy with it. Number 14 on this list is my wrapped in brioche shawl. This is by Roxanne Yun, and I did this as a little knit along with one of my close knitting friends. When we first started knitting together, we liked to do the same patterns together when we were learning new techniques so that we could kind of like chat with each other and troubleshoot with each other to see if we could figure out what some of the problems were. And this was a project that we made to learn how to do brioche. And this is actually 2-color brioche. I'll turn it around, you can see the other side. I chose 2 similar colors to use because I didn't want a really stripy looking shawl. I wanted something that was a little more of a gentler contrast. So these 2 yarns are the speckled blue is by a dyer local to me, who I'm blanking on at the moment, but of course I'm going to link all of my project pages to what I'm showing you today. I'm going to link them all in my description, so you'll be able to go and check out all of my information. If you have trouble accessing Ravelry and you want to know more about my projects, just send me a message and I will share the information with you so you don't have to go on Ravelry. So that is the more like speckled blue. The beautiful seafoam green is by We Love Knitting, which no longer creates yarn, which is unfortunate because she used to dye the most beautiful yarn. And she actually sent me this one as sort of like a bonus skein when I did an order one time, and one of the skeins in the order got messed up. And you know, I didn't ask for that, and I didn't complain about the yarn. She just sent it with my original order to apologize for one of the skeins not looking proper. So that was really appreciated, and it became this beautiful shawl. So I don't typically wear shawls the shawl way, which is this way. It's also a little too small to do that. My friend and I learned a lot about the yarn recommended in a pattern versus the yarn that you choose to use. And I thought because the pattern used 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn, I could also use 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn and not have any issues. Turns out there can be some issues because the 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn that was used in the pattern are a lot bigger yardage than the 2 skeins of fingering yarn that I used, but that's okay. I still got a fairly nice shawl out of it. So I tend to wear it wrapped around my neck like a scarf, and as you can see, the 2 ends still kind of like hang out in the air. So what I typically do is I will put one underneath the triangle, one over top this big triangle, and I have shawl pins that I use that I will just see right where my thumb is sticking out. I will put the shawl pin through there and it'll hold it all together. Looks really nice and decorative, and it's nice and cozy. Continuing in the vein of shawls, this is number 13 on the list. This is also sort of a self-drafted idea, but this one didn't become a pattern because this was super, super simple that I didn't think anyone would actually want to get a pattern of it. According to my Ravelry page, this is my most popular thing that I have ever made because I've gotten the most so-called favorites on this project compared to every other project that I've ever made. And it kind of stumps me sometimes because it was such a simple idea. I essentially just knit a rectangle and I sewed it together and I put some decorative leather buckles on it and called it wonderful. But that was kind of really new and creative to people, and they were really impressed by it. And I was blown away by that feeling of impressing people. So this yarn is pretty special yarn that I fell in love with almost as soon as I saw it. This came out, I think, winter of 2018 or 2019. This is a Lion brand yarn. It is called Go for Faux, and it is yarn that is meant to look like faux fur. And I absolutely adore it. Funny enough, it was not available in Canada except through the Lion brand website. And if you are a Canadian and you've ever shopped on the Lion brand website, you know that international shipping is a punch to the gut. It is always awful. It doesn't matter how much or how little you buy, unless you reach that free shipping quota, which is I think $75 or more. It is expensive to get yarn, Lion brand yarn, shipped to you in Canada. However, this yarn was available in select Walmarts in the US, and at the time my parents were snowbirds living in the US for the winter, and they were living in Florida, and believe it or not, the Walmarts in Florida had a faux fur yarn. Go figure. So I picked some up when I was visiting them for Christmas that year, and I knew I wanted to make something like cozy against my neck, but I, again, couldn't find a pattern that I really liked or that I thought would work well for it, so I ended up just coming up with something myself. And like I mentioned, I knit a rectangle, and then I sewed it together on the sides, and I added these decorative buckles. At first I thought I would be able to just connect it with the buckles, but it flopped over too much. It wasn't like holding its shape. It was just like dragging in a weird way. So I ended up just using a little bit of thread to sort of just connect it at the spots that were hanging down. So there's a couple of spots along here that I've just done a little stitch in, stitch out to connect it. There's another one underneath that holds it together underneath. And I ordered these buckles special from Etsy. I found someone, I think they were in Montreal, that made leather products, and they were able to stamp a bunch of holes in these buckles for me so that I could sew them onto the cowl. And I absolutely love the result. I feel very chic when I wear this. That might be because I based the idea for it off of an Anthropologie faux fur cowl, and Anthropologie is so beautiful. Also super expensive, but I love that idea. When I saw this yarn, I thought, I can do that with this cool yarn. I'm going to make it work. And I did. And thus was born my faux fur cowl, which seemed really simple to me, but was a really big hit. Number 12 on my list is a project that I no longer have. It is the Capulet blouse by Fable Knitwear or Fable Knitwear. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it because she is Norwegian. I'm not sure if she has a different pronunciation. And I test knit this for her back in 2018, I think. And it was my introduction into her patterns. I forget how I found her initially, whether it was through Instagram or just like trawling through Ravelry and spotted her. But Helen is very, very sweet. I really love her designs. She does a lot of historical and vintage inspired patterns. And she does her best to try and be size inclusive. It doesn't always work, such as my sugar plum jumper adventure, which I shared in one of my previous podcast episodes. But when I did the Capulet blouse, I wasn't the same size that I am right now, so that is why I no longer have this sweater, because it does not fit me anymore. Someday I will remake it because I think it's a beautiful pattern. I really love the style of it. It was such a beautiful pattern to wear out for work and for dates. I really loved wearing it with a high-waisted skirt, and I'd love to remake one and have one probably in like a white or a cream because I think it would just look so beautiful and elegant. But this was a really fun test knitting adventure for me, and I absolutely loved the result. And since then I fell in love with Helen's patterns and with like vintagey patterns because I loved how feminine they were, and like I've always been like an old school Hollywood fan, but also she does more of like the 20s, 30s, 40s styles, which are just beautiful. And now she's doing more sort of like 1880s, 1890s patterns, and she's just one of the only designers out there doing something like this, and she's doing them in a range of sizes. And one of my favorite things about Helen and her patterns is that if you go to her pattern pages on Ravelry, she usually has a little note at the bottom that says, if this pattern has not been tested in your size, send me a message and I will give you the pattern for free and you can give me feedback. So that is a great way, especially if you're a newer designer and you want to do some size inclusive patterns, but you just can't get testers, or you are struggling to work on a larger size, is reach out to us, the plus size knitters, and we can work with you to help you make your design more size inclusive. So I know from experience that sometimes I am the only plus size tester that Helen gets, and that's kind of unfortunate. A lot of her earlier patterns are the ones that are not as good as the later ones for grading versus just adding more stitches and calling it a larger size. And I think that's the problem that I had with the sugar plum jumper. But we're not talking about the sugar plum jumper, we're talking about the Capulet blouse, and I didn't have a single problem with that. I do remember thinking I wish I had sized up just because I didn't realize how snug the body of it was. So if I was to make it again, obviously I would have to size up already because I am bigger than I was then, but I might also size up my needles or something just to make the body of it a little less snug. The cabled ribbing style of the body is quite a tight stitch pattern compared to the stockinette of the top part of the blouse. So that's something that I would do differently when I make it again. I do kind of miss my pale pink one. It was really pretty, but that alpaca was itchy. I don't know why, but it was really itchy. So I didn't wear it very often, and then when I sized out of it, I thought, you know what, it's okay. I don't mind. I didn't wear it all that much. Number 11 on this list, which is making me realize that I have a few test knits on this list, and apparently I really love some of the things that I've test knit, even though I don't always love test knitting. But this is one of the examples where it was honestly the most chill test knit that I have ever done. It is the Belle's Beanie by Amba O'Brien, who is an Australia-based knitwear designer, and I signed up for this one through Ravelry. This was a Ravelry-based test knit, and I think it's one of only 2 Ravelry-based test knits that I've done, especially because I didn't do a lot of test knits early on in my knitting career, I guess you could call it. I tested more as I got more comfortable and more experience with test knitting, and then those tests tended to be on Instagram or through email or something like that. But this was one done through Ravelry. And I absolutely adore this pattern and I adore this yarn, but mostly it has this wicked awesome pom-pom on it. So let me just give you a swirl so you can see it. This has got to be one of my favorite hats that I've ever made. And it's the first time that I ever did twisted rib. And I can understand why people don't like twisted rib when you have to do full twisted rib. But this was half twisted rib, which I actually find just as intuitive as regular rib. Because when you're twisting, you're going through the back loop of the stitch. And when you're doing knitting through the back loop, it's just as simple as if you went through the front. In fact, sometimes when I'm doing ribbing, I find it actually a little easier to do half twisted rib when I'm knitting through the back loop because I feel that I don't have to move my yarn as much. I am an English style knitter, so that means I hold my yarn in my right hand, and I find that I don't have to move it as much when I do half twisted rib. Full twisted rib is a whole nother story, and I completely understand why people don't like that because purling through the back loop is one of the trickiest, finickiest, most fiddly little knitting things that I've ever done. So totally agree with people when it comes to full twisted rib. When it comes to half twisted rib, I actually really like it. So this pattern is actually done entirely in twisted rib, but the reason that this band here looks the same as the top of the hat, which you'll see if I take it off and show you, the reason that the twisted rib looks the same on this flipped brim as well as the body of the hat is because you do your twisted rib for about, I think it was an inch or an inch and a half, and then you flipped your knitting inside out and kept going with the twisted rib so that when you're going in the round, you're always going to have that beautiful, almost braided looking knit stitch and your normal purl stitch, even though technically you're on the opposite side of the knitting, which I thought was really cool. And obviously I also love this because this has got to be one of my favorite yarns that I've ever used. This is Spun Right Round DK, and this is the color Lights Out, which I absolutely adore. And someday when I have a bunch of money hanging around, I'm going to buy a sweater's quantity of this and I'm going to make myself just like a beautiful plain sweater just to let this yarn shine and so that I have something nice and big to wear with such a bright, vibrant color because it just makes me so happy. I love all the shades of purple, the little just dabs of hot pink. Whoever designed this colorway in the company just was having a fun time that day. And I love it so much. Rounding out the top 10 of this list are my Even Star mittens, which technically the pattern is called Even Star Gloves by Audrey M. But I've just titled my pattern Even Star Mittens because I turn them into mittens. So these are actually fingerless gloves. And the first time I made them, I did make them as fingerless gloves because I made them for a friend of mine who at the time was working a job that her hands got very cold, but she still needed to use her fingers for typing. And she absolutely loved them. And I loved the yarn combo that I used for her, so I copied it and made them for myself. But I made myself mittens. And if you look closely, you can see I have these little holes on my thumbs, and they are so that I can take my thumbs out and I can use my phone because I am the type of person that I usually pull out my phone when I'm waiting for the bus or, well, when I was waiting for the bus. I live in a place now where I have to drive to work, so I don't have the option of a bus. But if I am walking around, there's always going to be a reason why I pull out my phone and I need to tap something on my phone. So that's why I don't like full mittens where you don't have an opportunity to take your thumb out. So I made these little slits right here. But the few times that I have worn these since I moved to where I'm living now, I really wish I hadn't made these little holes because they are actually quite drafty. They're pretty big holes. They're probably bigger than I needed. I probably only needed like a little tiny hole, but I did like a 3 or 4 stitch hole. So eventually one day I'll just sort of pull the 2 bits together and just seam them closed, because I think I'll wear them more as full mittens than I would with these little peekaboo thumbs. But the pattern is absolutely beautiful. It's this gorgeous cable design. This is probably one of the more intricate cable designs that I have done. And the original Even Star glove pattern actually goes quite far up your arms. It's more of like a gauntlet style arm warmer almost, versus I just wanted some gloves that had quite a nice cuff length so that my wrists didn't get cold. And I absolutely love the colors of these. Of course, it reminds me of the Even Star necklace that Arwen wears. Arwen has a lot of like really icy colors associated to her. When you first meet her, she's wearing like this beautiful like pale lavender color and steel gray. And she wears a lot of silver in her hair and of course her necklace. So I love this yarn for this project. Number 9 on this list might look a little big for me because I didn't make it for me. I made it for Doyle. This is Jason's Cashmere Hat by Melissa Thompson. And this is hands down one of my favorite patterns ever. I knit this pattern anytime I'm in a rut, or anytime that I need to whip up a quick gift, or anytime that I just want something comforting on my needles. This is the pattern that I go for, and I've made quite a few of them. But this one is the most special because this was the very first thing that I knitted for Doyle. And I started it when we were at one of our favorite places that we stay. And it was just kind of like symbolic of this trip that we were taking together. It was a very romantic trip. And at the time I was actually working on a very challenging test knit. And I just didn't want to bring that negative energy to this place that we had booked to stay. So I brought the yarn and the pattern for this with me, and I was just whizzing through it, and it just reminds me of the place that we stay and of that time with Doyle. And it's the first thing I ever knitted for him, and it looks friggin' stunning on him. I'll show a picture right here so you can see. But I absolutely love it on him, and I loved it so much that I made him a second one in blue. Because I make this pattern all the time. It's such a great pattern, and it's free. So if you want a quick little gift knit, some people are already starting for Christmas. I was at Michael's today and they already have Christmas stuff out with the Halloween stuff, which is also kind of early, but I like Halloween a little more than Christmas, so I didn't mind seeing the Halloween stuff, but I wasn't quite ready to see the Christmas stuff yet. So if you are looking to make a little something for someone you care about, I highly recommend this pattern. It is a unisex pattern. It is good for all genders, and I absolutely love it for myself as well. I've knit myself one in pink, which I'll show right here. I did a bit of a longer ribbed cuff for myself because I wanted that for myself. And of course I added a pom-pom because I'm a pom-pom lover. Doyle is clearly not. We're finally at the point where I am sharing something that you've already seen on my podcast. Number 8 is my souffle tee designed by Laura of Penrose Knits. This is the only test knit that I've done so far this year, and it will probably remain the only test knit that I've done this year. I'm trying to curb my testing because I'm now choosier about who I test for and the experience that I have, because I have had bad experiences and I just want to make the experience as relaxing as possible for myself. I am a slow knitter, so having short deadlines is a little tricky for me, especially because I need to make a larger size because of my body. So I pretty much only pick things that I really want to test. And I really wanted to test knit this design when Laura shared it. So I made this earlier this year. This is knit with 2 strands of, I used alpaca, but most people used mohair. And you use 1 strand for this beautiful yoke portion. and then you transition into using 2 strands, and at that transition you add this adorable little ruffle, which is the thing that sold it to me, because I just thought it was super cute, super feminine. I don't like really big ruffles because I have really broad shoulders, and I find that like if I have something super ruffly, it just makes me feel like I'm wider. So I loved this cute little delicate ruffle instead. And when I talked about this in my podcast, I think I was so distracted by being outside, because I was outside because it was the very first day of spring, and I was having a patio beer, and I was having a great time, except I live on a busy road, and there was so much traffic that day. There were bikes, there were trucks, there were just regular cars going by, and I had to pause so often, and I really lost my groove. So I actually forgot to talk about some of the things that I wanted to talk about then. One of which is, this is the very first time I have ever done a folded hem. So there's a little folded hem on the arm and another one on the waist, which not sure if you can see this or not. I don't know how far this goes down. But it was the first time I ever did it. Friggin' petrified about it. But I learned trust the designer, because Laura had listed all of the steps, making it super clear and simple. And I just chickened. I was a chicken. So I was just trying to figure out how to do it, leaving it till the very last minute because I was so scared of trying it. Once I, built up the courage and started doing it, I realized this was so easy. Why did I freak myself out? Why did I think that I couldn't do this or that it would turn out bad? I was most scared of the fact that it might be too tight. But as you can see, I have plenty of room because Laura is that good of a designer. She knew exactly how to make this work for people. And I followed everything she said to do. And I ended up with this perfect garment with these beautiful folded edges. And they just look so great. They're very chic. They really finished the garment off nicely. And it was super simple. But I do recommend, if you are doing a folded hem, use the little, they're kind of like clothespins, but for sewing. I'll pop a picture here so you can see what I'm talking about, and I'll include a link down below. But I use them for sewing all the time, and they were instrumental in holding my folded cuff in place so that I could sew it properly. And as you can see, I got great results. So let me just do a quick little turn around so you can see how cute this is in the back. As you can see, it's got this adorable little keyhole detail. Mine might look a little off-center, and that's because I accidentally did my I-cord edging inside out. At the time, I hadn't done my ruffle yet, and I couldn't, because it's dark yarn, I actually couldn't tell whether I was going in the right direction or not until I was almost all done. And at that point, Laura said, don't worry about it, just leave it, it's fine. So my keyhole might be off-center because it kind of went a little wonky when I was making it. But I love this sweater. I wear it all the time. I was actually wearing it in my most recent post on Instagram, so check that out. You didn't think I would get through this list without talking about my favorite designer, did you? This is a Knititude design. Knititude is one of my absolute favorite designers. She's one of the first size-inclusive designers that I ever found, and she's also a fellow Canadian. So love that, love supporting fellow Canadians. This is her botanical tee, which, funny story, I actually helped her name this pattern. When she was first showing it off in an Instagram live, she was looking for names for this pattern. She hadn't named it yet. And because it had this beautiful lace leaf style stitch going up the center, I suggested the botanical tee, and she chose that as her pattern name. So I felt super chuffed about that. And when the pattern test call came out, I applied because I thought, okay, if I had a hand in naming this pattern, I would really like to have a hand in testing it as well. And she chose me, which was super exciting for me because she's one of my favorite designers, but also her tests are very competitive because she's very choosy about who she chooses to test her patterns because she wants to make sure it's going to be the best that it can be. And getting chosen as one of her testers told me that I was of that elite group, and it made me feel really cool. I sounded like a total dork there, but I was just super excited to be chosen for this test knit. So I test knit this pattern in winter of 2021, which is shortly before I was thinking about doing a podcast, and it is one of the projects that I wear literally all the time. The only other pattern on this list that I think I wear as much as this one is my souffle tee. And that's because these are really, really good tops to be able to wear to work. Now, because of a little thing called the pandemic and staying at home for almost 2 years, doing a lot more eating, a lot less exercising, just like focusing on things that made me feel mentally well, I gained a bit of weight and I sized up. So a lot of my blouses for work just didn't fit anymore, and most of them didn't have any stretch to them. So then I started knitting some tops that I could wear to work, and this is one of them. Let me give you a little tour of this project. It has this beautiful lace detail down the front, but when you get to the back, it has that cute little eyelet detail. And I absolutely love that about it because it's not just interesting on the front, it's also interesting on the back. So this project is made using Lion brand Trubu, which is a 100% bamboo yarn. And I have a love-hate relationship with this yarn because even though it's really soft, it's very shiny, the drape is freaking fantastic on this. It pills very easily, and it is kind of splitty when you're knitting with it. I didn't notice so much because I'm an English style knitter, but those in the test knit who are continental knitters found it much more splitty than I did. So although this knit is only about 1.5 years old, it's already getting really pilly. And I don't know if you can tell just in the camera, but it has all these little like fuzzies on it, and it actually really annoys me because I love the pattern and I love the style of it, the drape. I just really don't like the fact that it looks really worn. So I'll probably knit this again at some point because I absolutely love wearing it. I will just choose another yarn that maybe has a bit more life to it than the Trubu. But it is such great drape. Oh, I love that yarn, but I also hate that yarn, so it's tricky, but I love this pattern so much. And it's by my favorite designer, Knititude. You ready for it? This is number 6 on my list. This is the Fenmont pullover, and it is the 4th test knit on this list. Who'd have thought that I would have enjoyed so many of the products of my test knitting experiences, just not necessarily the experiences themselves, but of the 4 test knits that I have shared in this list, I have enjoyed all of the test knitting experiences of these products. So this is a really fun project to talk about because I have never knit a sweater faster than I have with this project. This was a test knit that I think I was a little nuts to sign up for, but I did it anyway. This was a test knit for Emily Walton working with Expression Fiber Arts, and this is kind of full circle for me because Expression Fiber Arts is how I started knitting. Chandy, who runs the company, also did some YouTube videos about learning how to knit and learning how to crochet, and it was her Learn to Knit for Absolute Beginners video that actually taught me how to knit. And I have all of these wonderful things to show you today because of that one video teaching me how to knit. So thank you, Chandy. Thank you so much for turning me into a knitter. So yeah, when this test knit came up, it was another one that I sort of found trawling through Ravelry, found it totally by accident. but it was a fingering weight fade sweater, and I had recently done a faded t-shirt style sweater, and I wanted to try my hand at doing faded sleeves as well as a faded body and figuring out how to make them match. So smart me thought a test knit would be the best way to learn how to do that. Surprisingly, it did work out. I do not recommend using a test knit to teach you how to do a technique you don't know how to do, because there's a lot of added pressure when you're test knitting. But I did that, and I created this pretty friggin' awesome sweater. Now, this is also probably the most expensive sweater in my wardrobe. The striped hoodie that I made for Doyle is technically the most expensive thing that I've ever made. This is probably second. So this is made all with hedgehog fibers yarns. If you do not know hedgehog fibers, it is the multicolor bright neon yarn of your dreams. Her yarn is amazing. The colors are incredible. And most of these yarns came in a fade set, which I found at a yarn store in Florida when I was visiting my parents down there. And I thought you could only buy one of the colors in the bag. I didn't realize you had to buy the whole bag. And I fell in love with one of those colors, and when I took it to the cash and found out, no, you have to buy the whole bag, I thought, oh, well, I kind of like the other colors too, so I might as well do it. And it was over $200 US, which for me as a Canadian brought it up to about $270, almost $300. It really depended on the dollar at the time, and I really don't remember what it was. Because once your money is spent, do you really think about the changeover of money? No. So I used 4 of the yarns that came in that bag, and I had to add a 5th one because it wasn't quite long enough and the sleeves weren't quite long enough, especially when you had to do the fading and you had to transfer the colors over the body and 2 sleeves. So I actually have a 5th color here, which is some hedgehog fibers yarn that I had in my stash. So it is still all hedgehog fibers, but everything except this very last chunk on the sleeves and the hem is their merino singles, and then this is their sock. So it feels a little different, but in the grand scheme of things, it's totally fine. So these colors are super, super fun. I can see if I can remember all of the colors. I think this one was Beach Bunny. I think this one is Ozone. This one is Deep End. And this one is Method. Yes, got them all. So they're all like some crazy awesome blues that Hedgehog Fibers dyes. I think it's not a perfect fade because you can clearly see the difference between Ozone and Method. No, Ozone and Deep End. And particularly where it is on my body, it's not the worst spot that it could be because it does kind of like create an illusion of cinching things in at the waist. But I do kind of wish it was a gentler fade. I wish that I had a color in between these 2 colors so that it wasn't so obvious of a change, versus if you look at Beach Bunny and Ozone, you really almost can't tell where one ends and the next one begins. Same with Deep End. Oh no, there is another one in between. I didn't get them all right. This is Deep End. This at the end is Method. This one in between I cannot remember the name of. So, oh darn. I thought I had it. It's okay. Yeah, so these 3 colors just sort of like seamlessly fade together. These 2 colors seamlessly fade together. There's a definite line in between those 2. So I kind of wish it was a little gentler, but I am super proud of this project because I knit half of a fingering weight sweater in 2 weeks. I gave myself a lot of wrist pain, but I did it because I joined the test knit kind of late, but they were just really happy to have a larger person. I think I was only knitting like the size extra large, but Other than that, I think they only had smalls and mediums, so they were happy to have a larger person. And even though it is a size extra large, and I'm a size 2X now, it still fits. It is not quite as, boxy as it was when I first made it, but I don't mind. I still really like it. I think it fits really nicely. And it's one of my thinner feeling sweaters that I wear a lot. So most of my long sleeve sweaters, I knit with DK or worsted, or in some cases a little bigger than that. So they feel kind of heavy and chunky. This one feels almost like a store-bought sweater, that kind of fine knit feeling. So it's kind of nice. But yeah, I had to knit it pretty quickly because I joined the test knit late, and then you had to have you had to have the yoke, half the body, and one sleeve done by a certain date because they wanted to get it released very quickly, because Shandy does this thing called Free Pattern Fridays, I think. Anyway, she releases a new pattern every Friday that highlights her yarn. As I've just mentioned, I did not use her yarn for this project, but she will put a certain yarn on sale every Friday, and that will be the yarn that's used in this pattern that she shares every Friday. And it alternates between knit and crochet. They're all on her website, Expression Fiber Arts, which I will link below. But yeah, they wanted to release it on a certain Friday, and when it became clear that nobody in the test knit had finished the whole sweater yet, they pushed it by 2 weeks. So I finished half the body, the yoke, and one sleeve within 2 weeks, and then I had another further 2 weeks to knit the rest of it. So I didn't quite finish it in time for the day of release. I finished it maybe 4 days after that release, but I was very close. So I shocked myself at how quickly I was able to knit this pattern, and it's really fun. It's my most colorful pattern that I have, and I absolutely love it. It makes me super happy to wear it. So there you go. Number 5 on this list is another pattern that I no longer have. It is the second project that I have ever made, and it is the Hunter Vest by Diana Burke. And I knit this because this is the project that made me want to be a knitter, because I had recently seen the Hunger Games Catching Fire around Christmas 2014, and I saw Katniss wear this incredible speckled white vest cowl type thing over a leather jacket, and I just thought, that looks so cool. I want that. And I did at first look to see if you could buy the item, and in order to buy the item, it was more money than I had to spend on such an item. But in my search, I found a pattern for it, which was significantly cheaper than the finished item. And I thought, I could knit. I could learn how to do that. That doesn't look so hard. See, pre-knitting Whitney didn't know anything. I didn't know that it is knit using a herringbone stitch, which is actually one of the more complicated stitches to learn. And it was all kinds of pieces that you had to put together. And I also didn't know at the time that it was a one-size pattern, and that, technically you probably should have found a way to make it fit me a little better, because I've got boobs. Correction, I have big boobs. And the pattern actually didn't fit me quite as nicely as it fit beautiful Jennifer Lawrence. But I did make it for myself. I have never been so excited to finish something, but I have also never had, oh no, I probably have. I had a lot of emotional breakdowns while making this pattern. It's probably not the only time I've had a lot of emotional breakdowns making a pattern. But as a learner who had only done one cowl before this, which basically I taught myself how to knit and purl, nothing else, to go off and do this, I was brave. I was off like a shot, like one super simple pattern, off I go to the super challenging pattern. Why not? I'm gonna do it. And I did it. But the reason I don't have this pattern anymore is because I may have taught myself how to knit. I did not teach myself how to weave in ends properly. So when I wore this hunter cowl for the Mockingjay Part 1 premiere, when that came out, I think a year later or 2 years later, it fell apart. It was a sad day. And I was still so new of a knitter, I did not know how to fix it. So it just got unraveled, and I think I donated the yarn. But one day I will make this again. I have some of this yarn in my stash, same yarn that I used for this pattern. I just don't know when I'm going to knit it again, because I don't know when I am going to feel confident enough to make it fit me better. And it's going to be quite a challenge when I do, because of the herringbone stitch and everything. And yeah, one day I'll do it. That day is not yet today. But it's still one of my favorite things that I've ever made. Check out that sleeve. This is number 4 on my list of my top favorite makes, and this is my wheat sweater. If you have watched my Ask Me Anything video, or if you follow me on Instagram, you may have heard me talk about the fact that my first sweater was a bust. So was my second sweater. So was my third sweater. And my fourth sweater was kind of a bust, but it wasn't right for me, so I gave it away to somebody else. This is my 5th sweater that I ever made, and it is the earliest sweater that I have in my collection of things that I made. A lot of people have kept their first sweaters. I did not, because they were bad. But I kept this one because I absolutely love it, and I love talking about this because I love showing newer knitters that it really doesn't matter if your first effort sucks, because you can just go again and try something else. Try something different, try something new, try again, again. Eventually, you're going to find something that works for you. You're going to find something that you love, just like I did with this sweater. So let me get in closer to show you these sleeves. They have the most gorgeous cable detailing down the side. That's what made me fall in love with this sweater. And I loved it because the actual sample picture for the pattern was knit in just a simple beige, and it really let this cable detail shine. And I was still new to cables when I did this pattern, so was my knitting friend that I knit the brioche shawl with. So again, we did a little knit along together, or I should say we did this knit along before we did the shawl. This was actually the first knit along that we did together, and it's because we both loved the pattern and we both knew that we wanted to try to make sweaters for ourselves, because she was also like me, that her earlier sweater efforts weren't the best that they could be, and she wasn't super happy with them. And we thought to ourselves, maybe we'll have a better chance of making something that we like if we both work on it at the same time, and we can help each other and troubleshoot together and support each other. And support each other we did, because this pattern has some tricky techniques which were new to us. So it has an I-cord edging along the neck, along the sleeves, and also along the hem. And as we were doing the pattern, she was struggling with getting her I-cord neckline to work. I was struggling with getting my cables to work, because when I switched from doing the yoke, I then switched to doing the body, finished the body, and then I did my sleeves last. I forgot what row of the cable pattern I was on, and I messed everything up. She painstakingly undid my work for me and got me to where I needed to be. Thank you so much. So she helped me with my sleeves, and I helped her with her I-cord edge, and at the time, she didn't have a yarn winder, so I wound her yarn for her, so we were like trading off how to help each other and fix things. So love, love, love that experience. So if you are interested in doing something and you have a friend that also wants to do that thing, consider doing it together, because it is so much more fun when you do it together. But I absolutely love this pattern. It is, until I knit some of my other sweaters like the Fenmont pullover, this was my most worn sweater that I've ever made. And even though it's from like 2017, I'm super impressed with how well this yarn has held up over time. It's one of my favorite yarns, and it's actually a really budget-friendly yarn. It is Knit Pick Stroll, and this is their tweed version, but you can also get it without tweed. It's seriously one of the softest superwash yarns that I've ever felt, and it's really affordable. I bet you didn't see this coming for top 3. This is my Shockwaves shawl. This is designed by Beta Jezik of Hedgehog Fibers, hence why it is knit with some crazy colors, and I absolutely adore this pattern, even though I don't actually wear it all that much. But I'll talk to you about why. So this pattern is knit with 4 balls of fingering weight yarn. And I chose to do mine all in the color scheme of blues and greens. And that is because I knit this shawl to take to Iceland on my very first solo trip that I'd ever done. I went to Iceland in 2018, and it was the first time that I had ever traveled by myself. I'd only ever traveled with my family or with friends or school before, and I really wanted to spread my wings, do something different, go somewhere by myself. I wasn't dating anybody at the time. I didn't have a lot of friends that were looking to travel at that time, but I really wanted to go on a trip, and I decided to go to Iceland because I thought to myself, if I'm going to travel by myself for the first time, I want to travel somewhere that I know I'm going to be safe, because even though I do look like I could probably hold my own, I kind of didn't want to be anywhere that I would feel uncomfortable being a solo female traveler. So I chose to go to Iceland because it is actually one of the safest countries in the world. It is also one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I absolutely love the scenery of Iceland. I didn't have the best time visiting Iceland because, wouldn't you know, solo travel, kind of lonely. So I didn't have a great time being in Iceland by myself. So eventually I do want to go back, and my fiance Doyle also wants to go to Iceland, so we'll make that a trip that we'll do at some point together. But just seeing the beautiful landscape of Iceland, it was just stunning, and I knew leading up to the trip, so I went in June, at the beginning of the year, January time, I knew I wanted to make something for myself that I could take that would be a really versatile piece, and I knew I wanted it to be knitwear, because I had heard that even in June, Iceland can be quite cold. And I thought, okay, what's going to be better than like a really awesome travel shawl? Because at the time I had seen these really like big, almost blankety shawls really sort of making their way over Ravelry and Instagram, and people were really into them, and there's a lot of patterns like them. Like Stephen West does a lot of really big shawls. Amba O'Brien does them as well. Sosu Knits also does some. There's a lot of different people that do really big shawls. And I thought to myself, I want one to wear on my trip, and I'm going to pick yarns that are all sort of like colors similar to Iceland. I loved all of these yarns together. It is meant to be a contrasting piece. So instead of doing a fade, which I could have done if I moved these colors to a different, like if I just swapped this color and this color, it would have been a fade shawl versus this really awesome stripy colorwork shawl. But the whole point of the shawl is to have this crazy contrast, because that's what gives it the really cool color changes and makes it really stand out. And I took pictures when I went to Iceland wearing my shawl at the Diamond Beach, which is close to Jökulsárlón. I think I pronounced that correctly. I hope. If I didn't, I apologize. Which is the Glacier Lagoon, which was the single thing in Iceland I was most excited to see, because I was just super excited about glaciers and glacial water, that beautiful, beautiful blue. And I got to see it. It was stunning. And then the Diamond Beach was just super cool because there's these gigantic chunks of ice, like crystal clear glacial ice, just hanging out on this black sand beach looking like diamonds. It was so cool. So I made this for the trip, and it's one of my favorite things I've ever made, even though I don't wear it very often because it's big. It's kind of big. I love the idea of the big travel shawl, but for me, in reality, it doesn't feel as comfortable as something like a pashmina that is way lighter. So even though this is knit with fingering weight yarn, this is 400 grams because it's 4 skeins that are all 100 grams each. And it's just heavy and it's kind of bulky. You can see here, it's kind of hard to like take it off and shove it in your bag when you don't want to wear it. Although it is quite nice to wear as a blanket on the plane, I will tell you that. So when I travel, I tend to just take wool pashminas, which kind of do the same thing as this, but they're a lot lighter and they're kind of easier to pack away. If you have seen my 1K Ask Me Anything video, you might know what I'm about to show you now. But if you haven't, this will be your first time seeing my second favorite project that I've ever made. And this is another project that has no pattern. It was another self-drafted idea, and it ended up working out, and I'm super excited about it. I don't have it on because, like some of my other projects, it doesn't fit me anymore. It actually didn't really fit me at the time because I sewed things a little too tightly, but I managed to wear it for the event. I am talking, of course, of my chainmail. Now, I designed this chainmail based on the Lioness Rampant by Tamora Pierce. I'll include a picture right here because, you know, it's a little book. I was dressing up as the Knight Alana from this book series because I got to meet Tamora Pierce, who loved my outfit. She wrote in my books that she was super excited to see my outfit. And obviously I'm not wearing said outfit now, but here's my outfit. And it's really cool. This was the first time that I'd ever knitted something for a costume. It will definitely not be the last because I had such a fun time. It was super exciting. And I looked pretty much identical to Alana on the cover here. Originally, I just had the basic gray chainmail, which goes like this. It's kind of dragging down, but it did sort of like come like this. It was kind of like mid-thigh-ish. And originally I just had the plain gray, and it was one of my friend's ideas to add this little bit of gold edging on the top and the bottom. And if you have keen eyesight, you'll see this is a picot bind-off, which if you've never done a picot bind-off, it is so time-consuming and it's very fiddly. It is not my favorite because I had a nasty experience with it when I realized I wasn't going to have enough yarn to do a bind-off, and I had to undo a picot bind-off, and I ended up losing like this much of the shawl that I was working on. So I don't have a good relationship with picot bind-off, but I did it for this project because it really does give it that knight in shining armor wearing a shirt of chainmail look to it, and I love it. It looks awesome. So that is my second favorite thing that I've ever made. Love the experience of wearing it. It was really, really comfortable. Obviously, so much lighter than real chainmail, and obviously doesn't make the same noise that real chainmail makes. But also really awesome to meet one of my absolute favorite authors dressed up as one of her characters and have her compliment my outfit. It was really awesome. So that's why this is my second favorite project that I have ever made. Did you guess that this was my favorite pattern? You probably did, because I have gushed about this pattern every chance I get. This is, of course, my Into the Woods jumper by Melody Hoffman, and this is my first foray into colorwork sweaters. I cannot get enough of this pattern, cannot get enough of Melody Hoffman. Absolutely adore everything about this pattern. So I discovered her totally randomly through the YouTube algorithm. Thanks, YouTube algorithm. You did good that day. And I started watching her podcast episodes, which are just absolutely stunning. They're vlog style. They're very cinematic. She has the most beautiful, relaxing music. It feels like a warm cup of tea in video format. So I highly recommend you check out her videos. And that led me to checking out her Ravelry page because she said she was a knitwear designer. At the time that I first checked her out, she had quite a few knitting patterns, but this was the one that really stood out to me. And her sample is just knit in sort of like a light mushroomy brown and a cream color for the trees. And I knew I must have something in my stash that would work for this pattern. I was also shocked that it was a really size inclusive pattern. Like, I honestly could have gone down a size for this because it's quite roomy, but I kind of like that it's oversized because then it's just like really cozy and comfy. I wear this all the time in the winter. It is hands down my warmest sweater because it is all knit with 100% wool. And of course the whole chest area is double layered because of the floats. So when I first saw this pattern, I went for a dive in my stash, and the first color that I saw was this rusty orange, which is Cascades yarn. And I thought, okay, I have to have something that will go with this color because this is so autumny. I was starting this project around like August, September, so I was getting into the fall mood, the fall vibe. And I found two yarns. I found this, they were both like this really dark green, one of which was Fleece Artist Vine, which is a Tweedy yarn, in the color Balsam. And the other one I had was a Knit Picks yarn Stroll, like I mentioned before, one of my favorite yarns ever, in the color Aurora Heather, which matched Balsam to a T. It was amazing. When I swatched this up, I was just so excited about the colors. Actually, no, I didn't swatch this. When I started knitting this, I realized how perfectly the yarns went together because the Fleece Artist yarn had a bit of a variation to it. It was a tonal. It wasn't just a solid dark green. And although you can see that a bit on this project, I love that the Stroll kind of, tones down that color variation. So it looks more almost like a kettle dyed yarn. So it's almost entirely one color, but it just has that slight differentiation that makes it a really interesting color to look at. Sorry if the lighting looks a little bit different. I ran out of juice on my phone and it cut me off partway through. So I'm going to try and pick up where I was. I was talking about how I always thought that my favorite color was blue, and I usually told everybody that my favorite color was blue. But I think my favorite color is actually this beautiful dark green. I absolutely love this color because I'm a big fan of fall, and to me this is like peak fall color. Don't wear it a lot in the summer because it's not really a summery color, but I wear it a lot in the colder times. So the reason why this is my top favorite make is because I absolutely loved the experience of making this sweater. I didn't set myself any deadlines for this, but I knew I was hoping to finish it before Christmas because I knew it would look really cute for our Christmas photo. My parents and I started the tradition a few years ago of always taking a Christmas photo together, and last year was the first Christmas that we were separated, which was kind of sad, but we got through it. My parents spend their winters in Florida, and Doyle and I were just feeling too nervous about COVID to fly down and travel to be with them at Christmas time, so We did Christmas over Zoom, which I think a lot of people did that year. But Doyle and I took a picture together in our backyard, and it was super cute. I think what I loved the most about the experience of making this pattern is, first of all, it made me feel super confident with the color work. I felt really excited trying a new skill, having it work out. The yarn combos, like the colors were just stunning, and I just loved looking at it. It just made me so excited to work on it because I got to look at these colors again. The yarn felt really nice on my hands. But I think also I was really in the mindset of the whole slow living, making clothing for yourself kind of vibe that I felt from watching Melody's podcasts. So I kind of was like taking what I was seeing in her videos and internalizing it and bringing it out through making her pattern. So I just felt so relaxed whenever I made this pattern. I loved looking at it whenever I pulled it out of my knitting bag, and I made the cutest reel. It's my favorite reel that I've ever made of the progress of this sweater. I just had an idea, sprang to mind, started working on it, and then I found the perfect music for it when I was ready to release it, and it was my first reel that got over 10,000 views, which was super exciting to me. Could not believe that. Was super stoked. And I love seeing my favorite things that I've done creatively be something that other people really like to see and sort of like take in themselves. So I love sharing my creativity with people, and I love having other people really appreciate that creativity. All of those reasons are why my Into the Woods sweater is my favorite make that I've ever made. And that is it for this romp through my top 15 favorite things that I've ever made. I loved doing this video. This was really fun, and although my anniversary is in August, because who starts a podcast about knitting in August? Clearly this weirdo. I'm just so excited to have been on this journey for the past year. I love sharing my makes with all of you, whether they be new ones that I've made for the podcast or old ones that I've had for a while. I loved sharing this with all of you, and I look forward to all kinds of more sharing in the future. I've got some really fun video ideas planned for the next year and a bit, and I'm excited to see where the Knit by Whitney podcast goes next. And until then, everyone, take care and happy knitting!